So in this session what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about cottonwool children. So I talk quite often about how children from 0 to 3 are kind of our capsule generation, or our capsule kids. So they go from the cot to the high chair to the car seat to the stroller, then back to the car seat, back to the high chair, back to the cot, and they're never getting out and being free-range kids. And what has happened is, if you look at children today, like, I don't know if you remember, you may not be as old and crotchety as me, but when I was a kid, I had permanent scabbed knees, I broke my arm a couple of times, I was having bruises and everything. I've got bruises still because I'm still fairly useless at this, but I had all that stuff. And if you look at our children today, a lot of our children are immaculate all the time. They're beautifully dressed, there's nothing out of place, they're not grubby and dirty and muddy, they don't have scrapes and strains. We worry about our children so much being hurt that we're protecting them, we're wrapping them up in cotton wool. And so cotton wooling kids, what it has is, it's us wanting to keep them safe. It's come from a really good place inside us. But what happens is, when we cotton wool our children, we stop them from being able to explore the physical boundaries, which actually in the end keeps them safe. The thing with cotton wool kids is that they're great as long as they're with an adult. But the minute the adult is gone, the minute their central focus is gone, they don't have the internal compass to tell them where to go and what their boundaries are. So we need to teach our children to have a bit of liberty and a bit of space, so that if we're not there, they can resolve problems by themselves. That's the whole point of us being a parent or a caregiver for them, is to teach them to learn how to look after themselves. And so part of that is unwrapping that cotton wool, allowing your child to risk take. Now, as part of that, part of the reason that we often have children with a lot of anxiety is they're cotton wool kids. But the other reason that a child can have lots of anxiety is that they tend to have a combo. Now, if you're a two-parent family, this will be very much so, but you can create this combo just by being one of these parents without the other parent being there. So an example of this is with if we've got a two-parent family, I'm going to have it a mum and a dad just for generality's sake, so apologies for those of you who don't fit that model. But so we've got one mum, and she's a loving, sweet, amazing mum, very gentle, very kind, wouldn't say boodagoos, loves her child so much, and that's great. It's great to love our children, but what happens sometimes is we love our children so much that we're very worried about putting firm boundaries around them, because it makes us feel like we're being mean to them. And so what happens is the mum tends to have these in and out boundaries, kind of like a jellyfish shape, very soft. And so the child thinks the boundary is somewhere, and then it comes against it, and the mum elongates that boundary, makes it bigger, and it's like a wobbly boundary. So the child isn't secure in that. They don't feel very much so that they know exactly where the boundary is. Now what happens is, if you have two parents like that, what happens is you get a very free-spirited child who can be very difficult for everybody else, but is normally okay in that combination. But if you have the other partner, the other parent of that child, if you have them as the converse of that, with the tight boundary, so think of it like a rebounder, a round rebounder boundary, very tight, not allowing the child to do anything, always giving lots of rules and all that sort of thing. If you have that combination, it creates a huge amount of instability for the child, and that creates a lot of anxiety. And so often that parental sort of division between this very soft, fluid boundary and then that very tight boundary can be one of the things that causes children to feel less resilient and less safe. So it's really important for us to think about our boundaries as being really firm, fair, and allowing the child to have enough room in those boundaries to kind of make a few mistakes, but mistakes that we've thought about already. So for example, you might want your child to feel free to play outside, but you make sure it's fully fenced. So you tell them that where they're allowed to play outside. So they learn that they can be trusted to be almost unobserved or unchecked on, but it is in a safe place. Obviously, if you were next to a motorway and you had an open garden, then you have to look at whether that can be a boundary you can do. So you need to look and see whether you can create firm boundaries. Another really just simple, really good example is going to a park. Now this is a thing that often a lot of parents have with young parents, they have an issue with. And so what I suggest you do is, before you even get out of the car, you remind the child of what the boundaries are. And you talk about the physical boundaries, where they're allowed to play, where they're not allowed to play. And you make it a really interesting and specific thing, and then you give them the fate worse than death. And the fate worse than death is if they go out of those boundaries, if you've got other children with you, it's not all of the kids missing out now and going home. That child has to sit there or stand there watching the other children play while they hold your hand. And most children don't enjoy that because they want to be playing, and they will remember that you have set a boundary and it kept it safe. There's still heaps of room in that space for them to play and enjoy, but it's a safe boundary. Okay? So that's one of the part of the things, is us uncottonwooling our children, allowing them space to risk take, allowing them space to do things, and trusting them that they're going to be okay. And if they're not okay, we will deal with that as well, which we'll talk about in a later session.